Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. Sponsored as always by BetterHelp.com. I'm Kevin Kelton, and I'm along with my friends Greg Matusak.
Hey, Kevin, I want to wish, since we're recording on Sunday, happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Ward Anderson is here.
Hey, it's an amazing weekend here. We got another great one. It's a scorcher. Gonna be a fabulous More Perfect Union podcast. Just want to thank Budweiser, King of Beers, and the beer of choice for the More Perfect Union podcast.
And also here, returning for her follow-up, her second appearance on the More Perfect Union, our friend Robyn Rosenfeld. I'll remind you that Robyn was here once before. She's co-hosted the podcast Art Laws, and your documentary series, Infodemic, premieres on PBS on July 11th. Robyn, you want to remind our listeners what that's about?
Yes, Infodemic, Global Conversations on Science and Misinformation. It's a docuseries that was a response to the pandemic and the rise in misinformation, but also climate change, post-truth, conspiracy theories. So I hope you'll tune in. It airs here in California in KCET, 7 p.m. on July 11th, and then onward across the country.
You know, you mentioned conspiracy theories. I set up my Google Mail to give me alerts whenever the name Kevin Kelton comes up in an article someplace on Google, just because I've got an ego the size of, a 5-story house. I get an email that's Kevin Kelton talking about something about a lawsuit involving the recount in Pennsylvania, in Georgia. And
Was that you?
No, it was a guy named Kevin Kelton who lives in Michigan. And then I started poking around and read up on this guy. He is a polar opposite of me. He is a Trumpite. He believes that the election was stolen. He believes every conspiracy theory. Seems like a nice guy. I read his Facebook page. Nice family guy. Has a great name.
You should
Get
actually
him on the
send
podcast,
him.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin and Kevin.
Kevin versus Kevin, Kelton versus Kelton. Maybe I should.
Oh, that'd be a great
there.
episode.
It's going to be the showdown of the season as the two Kevins come together on the mound. We're going to see quite the play this year, thanks to Budweiser, King of Beers.
But this week we wanted to start with what's in the news. Joe Manchin has offered up his own version of the voting rights bill, which is moderate, sensible, sets a minimum standard for fair elections, and it still doesn't have a whale's chance of passing. So,
Not a single chance.
I don't even think that Manchin will vote for it.
Is a whale's chance a thing?
No, I just made that up.
No, it has a better chance of passing than whale's chance of becoming a phrase.
So
I like it. I felt stupid for not knowing it. So I'm glad to know that it was made up on the
I'm
spot.
a little embarrassed that I said it. Has anything changed? Are we going to get a voting rights bill? Are we going to get an infrastructure bill? Can Schumer cobble together 50 votes? And even if he does, don't you need 60?
But hasn't Mitch McConnell made the proclamation that he will not pass any?
Yeah. So essentially, as I understand it, it's this. Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema specifically have said they will not do away with the filibuster, nor will they change the numbers needed. I think Tester might be sort of on the fence on it. They will have to go either figure out how to do this in reconciliation, which I don't understand how you do it because reconciliation is only for budget legislation, or they have to get a one-time dispensation from Manchin and Sinema to do away with the filibuster rule. And I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, and the sad thing is the Manchin bill is something that, for the most part, were things that the Republicans liked. Things like require voter ID,
Right.
with allowable alternatives. The things that they weren't crazy about were Election Day, a public holiday. And the things that they didn't like also, the GOP did not like ban partisan gerrymandering.
Yes.
They didn't care for that. And things like automatic registration through DMV. Okay. But it has an option to opt out. Each state could opt out of that. One of the big issues that GOP is putting up is that the federal government should not be so involved with states' own election commissions. Each state should set up their own. And
well, they claim that that's how it's worded in the Constitution.
And I agree with them.
But here's the argument that I would like the Democrats to try and make. I'm not saying that this is a slam dunk and you'd have to litigate it in the courts. But these elections are being held to elect federal officials. Congressmen and senators and presidents are federal elected officials. Mm-hmm. So an argument can be made that they have standing to have some input in how those elections are run. Why should any state be able to send a felon to Congress or decide that they're going to just totally revamp voting so that the person who gets the most votes doesn't win anymore? There's got to be some consistency within how federal elected officials are chosen.
You would think so. It's a national election.
Yes, yes.
And
it doesn't make sense.
You would think so, but once again, even though I am the most liberal lib who ever lived, I
say that 5 times fast.
Only if there's money involved. I do believe that some states are allowed to have primaries. Some states should have caucuses. Some should have open primaries. Each state should be allowed to make their own rules for elections. And this is a real slippery slope. Now, some of this is common sense. Okay. Election day, a public holiday. That's common sense. And a lot of this would help people. This would help more people to vote. And they all should be behind this.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about the other side of the apple, though, is the infrastructure bill. We might actually pass that.
Well, it's an infrastructure bill, but it's like 1/5 of what the Biden administration was going for.
Right. But I mean, it's an infrastructure bill that is like roads and bridges and trains. And it is like an old timey.
Right.
It's not like what the Biden administration saw as infrastructure with high speed internet or, healthcare
or elderly people. Yes. I agree with you. And we discussed this a few episodes ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the left is already talking about revolt on this. Like, this isn't what we were promised.
Yeah, they ain't revolting.
No,
They'll go with it. I saw Bernie Sanders on the morning show. I saw AOC. They're all complaining about it. Believe me, their votes are going to be there. If the Biden administration doesn't pass this, it's going to have a very hard time making a justification for a second term. Robyn, you were saying? No,
I was just saying, I mean, it sounds like that's the idea. One party would like to have nothing passed for the Biden administration. So, and therefore there won't be that second term. So isn't that the goal?
Yeah, of course. And yet they know that there's pressure on them to do something. Otherwise, at some point, you can make an argument that they were obstructionists and that will work against them. So they're playing that very fine balance. Okay, so also in the news, President Biden is having some friction from the Catholic Church. Greg, you're a very devout Catholic and you were following this. What's going on there?
I am Catholic. I come from a Catholic family. I was baptized by a bishop who was my cousin. I went to a church in Fairfield, Ohio that had a priest who was a child molester. So I guess I'm very Catholic. Thank you, Ward, for laughing. And it's not funny, but it's true. And I left the church for a while because of that. What's happening this past week is at a meeting and it was a virtual meeting of the bishops. They were deciding whether to rewrite the rules of communion and who should get it and who shouldn't. And Biden was named specifically because of his stance on abortion. Okay, since he is in a very unique position as president, that maybe he should no longer receive communion. Okay. Uh-huh. So nothing is changing yet. So we won't know until November. And as Biden has said, we'll see what we'll see. And it could be, could be nothing.
Well, when you say rewrite the rules, because again, I'm not religious. I'm certainly not Catholic. I don't understand a lot of this. Are they going to put something in that says the president of the United States cannot be given communion? Or are they going to say that anybody who believes in the right of abortion?
See, that's just what we don't know. Right now, the thought and a lot of the dialogue that was being passed is that any politician, anyone who votes in Congress, or anyone who has campaigned on a pro-abortion platform should not receive communion. Now, communion is like the end-all be-all for Catholics. Okay, that is one of the biggest sacraments. And then to deny Catholics that is a huge, huge deal.
The Catholic Church is very selective in who they forgive, who they do not, who they get behind when it comes to communion, and who they don't. Because as we've all heard, there are priests that have molested children that are still allowed to receive communion. There's murderers who are still allowed to receive communion. But if there's a politician that represents pro-choice politics, apparently that is a bridge too far. But the Catholic Church is a political organization, and it has been for hundreds of years. And this is no different.
There are politicians who represent pro-death penalty stances, and they have never been approached on this. Okay, there are governors who have never been approached by the Catholic Church saying, "Hey, you have the ability to save a life, and the Catholic Church would like you to stop this. And if you don't, we're going to take communion away."
There is one thing about that entire story that I think about. The Catholic Church doing this communion thing with Biden and everything like that. This is just more proof that in our society, people aren't holding back anymore when it comes to embracing cruelty and deliberately being vindictive and vicious and mean-spirited to those with opposing views. That's totally what this kind of thing is. It's like even now you've got, people in the Catholic Church going, "Oh, hate those liberals and all that. Let's make a big spectacle over refusing communion for Joe Biden." Everything has become so divisive that even in our religious institutions, you have people embracing cruelty and meanness. Cruelty and meanness has gotten to where it's dominating so many parts of our society. People are enjoying it, right?
I totally agree with you. I think you're spot on correct.
And that's everything. Everything that you see, not everything, but so much of what we see in the news, all this pushback, whether it's infrastructure, the communion with Biden, when people talk about cancel culture, everything like that, all of that is we are embracing mean-spiritedness and cruelty. And by the way, I mean everybody.
It's become like professional wrestling. It's become dramatized and sensationalized so that, they get viewers. And yes, that's become very mean-spirited. And I think it affects our culture. I mean, it sort of this hate culture is exciting somehow.
On this show, we've talked about it, and Kevin and I have debated it, and we've talked about it, about Bill Maher always talking about cancel culture and things like that. And I try to tell people that even what a lot of people see as cancel culture, though it's become this blanket scapegoat boogeyman or whatever, I said a lot of what people see as cancel culture is real. It's people being pushed and pushed and pushed on Twitter until they do something like fire somebody or blah, blah, blah. But what I've said is even that, what you're seeing is people using cruelty and meanness to troll. Most people, all this talk of, people are so easily offended these days, they're complaining and getting people fired. I go, I don't think they're actually offended. I think they're just enjoying fucking with people and getting people canceled. I think they enjoy the trolling. And we've somehow bought into this, oh my God, look how easily offended everyone is. And I go, yeah, some people are offended. And I think some people just know that they can manipulate something that's in the news to fuck with people they don't like and hurt them. And you know what I mean? And we've turned that into, look how easily offended everyone is. And I go, I don't think they were offended. I think they just knew that this would hurt you if they came at you with it.
And if we don't do something about it soon, democracy doesn't have a whale's chance. I'm going to keep saying that because I have to save myself now. So I'm going to turn that into a phrase. Let's take a moment to welcome back our sponsor, BetterHelp.com. the company whose mission it is to make professional counseling accessible, affordable, and convenient, so anyone who struggles with life's challenges can get the help they need anytime, anywhere, even a whale. BetterHelp will match you with your own licensed professional therapist. It's cheaper than traditional counseling. There's no commute, no parking. You don't have to get validated. There's no sitting in a waiting room as people sneak sideways glances at you, wondering why you're there, and you're wondering why they're there. Not only can you do video or audio only phone sessions with your therapist, you could actually just email and text with your therapist between sessions. And how cool is that? I'll bet the guy that you were paying $250 to in a big building downtown won't let you do that. If you're skeptical, but are still a little curious, but you're skeptical, go to BetterHelp.com and read their reviews. There's hundreds of them, and they are stellar. So if you're a More Perfect Union listener, you can get 10% off your first month by using our promo code MOREPERFECT, that's one word, no space, when you visit our sponsor's website at BetterHelp.com/MorePerfect. Once again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/MorePerfect. Start your new life today.
And while we're thanking our sponsors, we do want to thank Budweiser, King of Bears.
Which can also solve a lot of your life problems.
And cause them.
Budweiser, King of Bears. Right here on the More Perfect Union podcast. Kevin Kelton stepping up to the microphone. He's been here all night. And stepping up, Greg Matusek on deck.
Let's see, what haven't we talked about? Oh, we haven't talked about the Putin meeting, Biden and the Putin meeting.
A lot of Biden talk tonight.
A lot of Biden talk. Is he really worth all of this effort?
He must be exhausted. He must be exhausted. His ears are ringing.
By the way, you know that we've become a cruel society when the feel-good story of the week is that Biden and Putin got along all right. Everything was okay, you know?
Well, it's not just that. It's been there's criticism that this meeting really put Putin on top of the world. And just by Biden meeting with him alone.
But doesn't every president meet with Putin alone? I mean, I remember Obama doing it. Certainly,
interpreter, with an interpreter, yeah.
With an interpreter, yeah.
Putin doesn't speak any English, right? So they always have an interpreter.
But Robin's absolutely right. This was a no-win situation for Biden because Putin's losing a lot of stock in his country and on the world stage even, okay? With that in mind, this kind of everyone now looks at him again as who's the big man? Who are the two big men on the stage or the big people? I should be more gender inclusive. Who are the two big people? Well, it's Biden and Putin. Okay. I mean, he gives him this respect that he doesn't necessarily earn. Okay. Just by having it. Now, if he didn't have that meeting, then the critics would say he's afraid of him. Well, Trump went in there and had a grand old time. They were best friends. He treated him like a pussycat. I mean, did you see how he just did all these tricks for? Well, no, actually, but so it was a real, lose-lose situation for Biden. So Biden went in. He was very formal. You could see by his body language that he was sitting up straight. It was not a friendly discussion. We still don't really know what they talked about.
The Friends reunion.
Nuclear.
They talked about the Friends reunion.
Is Putin a Ross or a Joey? Or a Chandler? Clearly, Biden is a Joey.
Yeah.
Yeah, Biden's definitely a Joey. Putin is a Ross.
Putin is a Monica. It's a Monica.
Gosh.
Yeah, but yeah, like Robin said, cyber attacks were first on the list, and of course Putin was like, I don't know anything about these cyber attacks.
Whoever is the president has to meet with whoever's president of Russia. This is just how it is. It's an enormous country and one that we were in a Cold War with for many years. However, I'll give Biden credit in the fact that he came right out, unlike Trump, who came out and just went, oh my God, Putin, and he gushed all over him, right? At least Biden came out and went, yeah, it was good. We disagreed on some stuff, right? And then when somebody mentioned that Putin defended the insurrection on January 6th, Biden flat out went, that's ridiculous. He came right out and said, no, That's ridiculous. So for all the talk of him being too soft or whatever, I think Biden handled Putin pretty well. And on top of that, we have to remember that even though we treated them that way in these discussions, Russia's supposedly not our adversary. They're supposed to be our ally now, right? So, he can't be too adversarial, right? Like no president can be too adversarial.
No, because then you get nothing done.
You get nothing done, but then on top of that, then they really do become the adversary, right? Then they do fail to be an ally.
I want to address this for a moment. Oh, go ahead, Robyn.
Seemed cool. They talked about, Putin sort of dissected the death of the police officer during the insurrection as being natural causes, somehow implying that makes the whole thing less important or less awful. And the other thing is, he compared it to just a regular political rally with people being anti-government, against the election.
It was treason. We can say what it was.
Right, but Putin was trying to compare it to some of the protests in his country and make it seem more benign.
He was saying, "Oh, these people aren't being heard," or something like that. Like their voices are being silenced or some shit.
I want to make a little deviation since we're talking about Russia now. This isn't on the docket, but I want to throw this out. I was thinking this week, listen, all of us here lean Democratic. I'm old enough to tell you that I never voted for Ronald Reagan. I would imagine if given the chance, I don't think that anybody here would have voted for Ronald Reagan. But we know that his legacy has grown since his presidency. And the one thing, if you ever ask a conservative or a Republican why they love Ronald Reagan, they say, well, he single-handedly led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. Okay.
Yeah, he ended the Cold War.
He ended the Cold War. Okay, let's look at that for a second, because I started thinking about this week. When the Berlin Wall fell, we reunited Germany, and that was a wonderful thing. And that's had a lot of good repercussions through history since then. There are other satellites of the Soviet Union that have become freer, and that's a good thing. But Russia is still Russia. They are still, with China, our superpower nemesis or adversaries. They still counter us all over the globe in ways that we find annoying. There is still the potential for some kind of a nuclear showdown. So what did dismantling the Soviet Union really accomplish in terms of the Cold War? Yes, it did, like I said, unite Germany. It did make a couple of satellite countries, took them outside of the sphere of the Soviet Union. But now we just have Russia instead of the Soviet Union. They're still the same nemesis. So what was so great about the downfall of the Soviet Union?
Well, it's not the same. And the Soviet Union was a communist-led country, which we had fear of nuclear war quite a bit.
They're still communist, and we still have that same fear.
We don't have fear of nuclear war every day.
Well, we didn't with Gorbachev, and we didn't with Yeltsin either.
I don't know. I remember in sixth grade
I'm with Kevin
watching the
Kevin
Third Day. Yeah, I remember watching
nuclear war.
Greg, you're talking about the Soviet Union of the 60s and 70s.
No, I'm talking about them showing us a nuclear war propaganda film in 1983.
Yeah, but that was bullshit.
It was bullshit, but they still showed it to us, and it was still a fear that we lived under.
But I'm saying, just because we had the fear doesn't mean it was a legitimate threat.
And yet,
I agree with Kevin in that, in all honesty, Russia or the Soviet Union hasn't been a nuclear threat to the United States in actuality since 1982. I'm going to say, because we're talking about, we always knew, like, what is it we learned? That it was mutual destruction, right? That it would destroy the world, right? So none of us really thought we were going to nuclear war with Russia. And by the way, and I'm not someone to talk about it because I'm not an expert, but even now, with all of our talk of Russia and how we see them as an adversary and all that, I have friends that work in DC in politics, and we need someone who's a Russia expert to come on the show sometime and talk, because I've heard from friends who are scholars in Russian history and politics and all that, who say that we have built up this threat of Russia way bigger than it's ever been. And we've been doing it for decades.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. And that goes back to the 1940s with the whole communist blacklist and everything else. It was so far blown out of proportion against the threat.
All right. But even still, Reagan was pushing a Star Wars nuclear defense all the way to what, 86?
But imagine if he was doing that right now, Brett. Imagine if right now we were doing all of that with China right now. And we were like, we got to have a Star Wars program, and we got this going on, and we got nuclear weapons coming, and those commie bastards, those fucking Reds. Let's make a Sylvester Stallone movie about kicking the shit out of them. Now,
right. I would think
that. We would think that was absurd, but here's what's hilarious. China now is more powerful than the Soviet Union ever was then. And we were terrified of the Soviet Union then, and now China's way more powerful, and we don't have any of that shit going on.
And they're communist, and their power is economic. Not to say that they don't have a amazing military power.
Yeah.
But the bulk of their power on the world stage is economic, which is even more dangerous.
But we have economic ties with China. But we did not have economic ties with Russia.
But we have economic ties with Russia now. And so that's hilarious to me that we consider this. We're not in a Cold War now. But for years, the nation that was less of a threat to us was our number one enemy that terrified us, that we have movies all about them invading and destroying us, all this stuff. And just like Kevin and I were just saying, it was never actually that big of a threat to us. Now we have a nation that could buy us and sell us. And we don't think anything about that like we did the Red Scare of the 80s.
Right, because we are economically bound into China. You know what I mean? And whether they have a better propaganda department than Russia, than the Soviet Union, we had no economic ties with the Soviet Union.
Okay, just look at it this way. In 1985, we thought it was totally plausible that Russians would invade the U.S. through Colorado by coming up from Cuba, and a bunch of high school students would call themselves the Wolverines, and they would rise up and they would defeat the invading Russian military by becoming a bunch of little fascists who kill each other and Russians. We totally believed that, right? A few years ago when they remade Red Dawn, the biggest reason it flopped is everybody went, nobody's fucking flying in here and invading us. Get the hell out of here, you idiots. This isn't going to happen. And they didn't even believe it. They had to change the movie when they remade it. They had to make the villains North Koreans because when they shot it, they filmed it as China. But China was so disturbed by it, the studio changed it to North Korea, making it even less fucking believable that we were going to get invaded by a nation where they're starving, but they were going to somehow come over here and take us out with an EMP. This is what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that it's just funny to me that we were in this Cold War forever. Like Kevin was saying, nothing has changed with Russia at all. So the Cold War was either nothing or it never ended.
Right. Exactly. You know what I think in the middle there, I think 9/11 also just changed our perspective on where the dangers and the threats of the world were. We were so focused on this idea of a confrontation with another superpower.
Yeah. Right. We were used to traditional warfare, giant nuclear bombs, Hiroshima, those kind of.
And we found out that the real threat was box cutters. Yeah.
Well, that's also why we fucked up Iraq and all of that. Because how do you declare war on a group? How do you declare
on a way of thinking?
Everyone kept saying, well, who are we declaring war on here? Right? Because it's not the Iraqi people. It's not the Afghanistan people. It's not the Afghani people.
Say it's a war on a metaphor.
Yeah.
But you know what? We also learned what it was like to be the British during the Revolutionary War because we found ourselves the victims of guerrilla warfare.
And by the way, who funded, trained, and built that guerrilla organization that ended up becoming our mortal enemies?
America.
Ronald Wilson Reagan.
Yeah.
The Mujahideen, as you well know, grew in stature when Congressman Charlie Wilson convinced, others in Washington, D.C. and the Reagan administration that the way to screw with the Russians, to screw with the Soviet Union, was to give arms to the Mujahideen. And they became, of course, Al-Qaeda.
Anybody here seen Rambo 3?
Yeah, of course we have.
In Rambo 3, of the 5-part Rambo movie series, Rambo goes to rescue his mentor who is being held behind enemy lines. And he goes into Afghanistan and he frees his mentor thanks to the people that would become the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And at the end of Rambo 3, in the credits, it even says special thanks to the Mujahideen. Like it says something like to the honorable Mujahideen. It says something like real praising of them. And this is who wound up becoming the Taliban and Al-Qaeda.
I think Kevin's point was really interesting because I personally didn't know that little fact, and that the Mujahideen became Al-Qaeda.
Oh, yeah.
Was out of curiosity, do we blame Sylvester Stallone in any way for the Taliban?
No, but I do blame him for the Cobra series.
Okay.
But they have since erased that from releases of Rambo 3 when they put it out. Yeah, but it's in the original print of it, right? Now, as a little side note, entertainment fans, the movie Cobra by Sylvester Stallone is actually his version of what action comedy, Kevin?
I don't know.
Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Sylvester Stallone was offered the role of Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. It was a serious action movie.
I did not know that.
He turned down the role because he thought it was too light. He wanted it to be darker, more serious, and more violent. So he took the general idea, went and changed it, rewrote it, had the script adapted, and it became Cobra. And so Beverly Hills Cop was tweaked to become more of a comedy and offered to Eddie Murphy, which was, by the way, it's funny, we don't remember this now, considered a comeback at the time.
For who? For Stallone?
Eddie Murphy.
No. Beverly Hills Cop was not a comeback. Trading Places had been a huge hit.
Yes, it had. And then he'd had 3 flops. He even said when he guest hosted Saturday Night Live when Beverly Hills Cop debuted, he even said in his opening monologue, I wouldn't have come back here if it hadn't been for the fact that I'd had these movies fail. And he's like, I laughed and joked about this place, right? And he's like, but then I wasn't doing well, so I agreed. He goes, but then I got this script, Beverly Hills Cop, and I started thinking again, no, I don't want to be here, or something like that.
Okay, I'll have to research that.
Because he did Best Defense with Dudley Moore.
Uh-huh.
He had done that, and there had been one other movie that had recently not done well. And so Beverly Hills Cop was considered, I shouldn't say a comeback, but there was a worry that he had hit kind of a lull. And then that was the thing that catapulted him to superstardom. Okay.
There's your stream of conscious, folks. If you wanted to see a Rorschach test verbally, this was it.
Now, if you really want to have fun, this is for the film geeks out there. Go watch Beverly Hills Cop and Cobra back to back, and you'll be surprised at how similar the beats are.
Interesting. Okay, there you go. Well, while we're on the subject of movies, I understand that Batman was in the news this week. And who wants to feel this one? Because I just heard about this a half an hour before the show started. And wow.
Stop there, you dastardly villain.
You're doing the Adam West Batman.
Yeah, I'll take this one,
mister.
Please do.
So,
and Robyn, you may want to cover your ears.
Recently DC has a lot of different franchises. They have the comic books, they have the TV shows, the cartoons, they have the movies. But one of the cartoon series they have is based on the Joker's sidekick, Harley Quinn. And she's a kind of mischievous, kind of a funny, but they have an R-rated cartoon. Okay. A lot of swearing. The young lady from The Big Bang Theory, Kaylee Cuoco, voices
Cuoco.
Cuoco, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lot of swearing, lot of violence. It's a very adult cartoon. The writers for the cartoon recently did a podcast, and they asked, was there anything in it that DC said no? And the one thing that DC said absolutely no was they wrote a segment in it where they made allusions, or they drew out Batman not being, I'm trying to say this as delicately as possible, not being a selfish lover.
No, be a little bit more specific. This is already an R-rated.
Oh, okay. This is being R-rated. He was performing the act of cunnilingus, if we will, on Catwoman.
And apparently they excised that scene.
They said not at all. And I guess they said something to the effect of, this is something that Batman is a character that we sell toys, and he's a toy franchise. He's a hero. Heroes don't do that. And that was the line that freaked out Twitter. And since
it freaks me out too. That I would love to we could spend an hour just on the psychology of the man. And I am so sure it was a man who, in that development meeting, and Robyn, you're a producer, you've been in some development meetings. Mm-hmm. It had to be a guy who would say, heroes don't do that.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable.
Well, the funny thing is,
it has to be a guy.
DC has written some pretty adult comics involving Batman, including one where he had sex on a rooftop with Black Canary. He had sex on a rooftop involving Batgirl. He had sex. I mean, he's never shied away from the act of sex. But as far as that act, they couldn't find anything. So yes, I guess he draws the line. They didn't find it manly enough, or Batmanly enough, if I can say that. I guess there was nothing.
This is my city. This is my city, and I sit atop the skyscrapers, and I look at the full moon, knowing that I'll never go down on that moon. I'll never fully go down on that full moon. I am above it.
A missed opportunity. Redefine what manly is.
Yeah, exactly.
And who Batman is.
Right.
Because if I heard that was in the movie, I would pay to go to see that movie. And I haven't paid to see a Batman movie in about 10 or 15 years.
I don't think there's been a Batman movie I guess yeah, the Ben Affleck
maybe 20 years, because I haven't seen the last 2 or 3.
Oh, they've been the 4 hour Zack Snyder one is awesome. If you've got 4 hours to kill.
Robyn, I need
40 years to kill.
Robyn, I need to borrow your mask.
You need to hide your identity.
Not this Robyn. You're talking about Robyn, his sidekick.
Yes.
You're talking about Batman and Robyn.
Right. I wanted to make that clear.
Who I always wish I could pretend I was for Halloween.
Who, Batman or Robyn?
Borrow your mask.
Robyn, because I had his name.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Well, actually, a lot of the Robins now have been female. It depends on which version. I'm such a nerd. The fact that I know that.
Okay.
No one bats an eye the fact that he's like, I just found this 11-year-old. I think I'm going to put him in tights and drag him around the city and fight crime until they die. And then I'm going to grab another one. And for the record, most of the Robins die. And when I say most, I mean like almost all of them.
Not Burt Ward.
Really?
Yeah, Burt Ward. Yeah, well, Burt Ward has a great book. If you have not read it.
So I've heard.
It's awesome. I think it's called My Life in Tights.
It is.
Yeah, My Life in Tights. It's well worth it, and it tells all the stories of him and Adam West on the TV show. And
TV show is the best.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. All the movies never were as good to me as the camp of the TV series.
Yeah.
So, listen, we have some other things on the docket, but I just don't know that we could go back to talking about Juneteenth after we've had this conversation. So I'm going to call an audible here. We've been following the progression of Bill Maher in the Biden administration. And, Bill Maher had so much to chew on, just as all the late night comics did when Trump was president. But now that there isn't as much controversy on the international stage, and really not that much controversy in terms of national politics, it feels like Bill Maher is an angry man without a target. Wouldn't you say that's kind of accurate, Ward?
Yeah. I mean, I've always admired and respected Bill Maher, even when I didn't agree with him. And I don't always agree with him. I've never always agreed with him. And you know what? It's okay if some people want to complain about quote unquote cancel culture or people being politically correct or whatever. You know, you and I disagree on that. You think there's something to be said about cancel culture being a thing. And I don't think it's actually much of a thing, right?
You think it's just the natural consequences of bad choices. Yeah.
I do. And I think a lot of it is trolling. I think a lot of it isn't serious, but we're taking it seriously.
Yeah, we talked about that, right?
So I should say there's part of me that says cancel culture isn't a thing. And there's part of me that thinks it's cancel culture isn't a thing, but we're being trolled into thinking it is and not picking up on it. So it's one thing to think like that. You think like that to some degree or whatever. But man, it's like the past 2 seasons, but especially this season, Bill Maher is hung up on not just cancel culture, but he's really become grumpy old man bitching about kids. Because in the last 2 weeks, several times when complaining, he's actually gone, listen, kids, or let me tell you something, kid, or hey, kids. And it's such an interesting thing to me because, I mean, we all get there. I'm only 48 years old, and yet I find myself often going, oh, these kids with their... It's natural to do that when you reach an age when you're old enough to have kids and know what it's like to be a kid, but not be a kid. But he's just, it's almost like he's like a dog with a bone with the cancel culture thing. He's so angry about it.
I see, unlike Ward, I've never had respect for Bill Maher. I've never liked him. I think he's smarmy. But the thing that really bothers me, and I think it's the same with Joe Rogan, these are guys who take really difficult and nuanced issues. And you're right. And he does the, hey, kid, this is why it's simple. It's not simple. Healthcare is not simple. The economy is not simple. All these things that they are like, hey, here are the rules. The rules are A, B, C. No. There's all sorts of nuance that make these things extremely difficult and extremely and as a white man of privilege, and he is, for him to say, well, why don't you just do this? It's infuriating to say, hey, it's simple. Follow these rules and you'll be fine. Or you have to do this and kid. Or anytime he talks down to someone like that, that's why I have so little respect. And like I said, I'll lump Joe Rogan in there because I'm hoping everyone will go to our pay-per-view where Joe Rogan and I box.
That was a great match. That was a great match. I did not expect you to do as well as you did.
Yeah, exactly.
6 rounds. 6 rounds. But you know what? What I mean by, you don't want to get into cranky old man territory. And what I mean by that is Young Turks actually pointed this out. A few weeks back, Bill Maher did this long condescending rant about Twitch and how people watch other people play video games. And he just went into this, what kind of losers are you fucking kids today that you're watching people play video games? How pathetic is that? And then people were like, yeah, Bill, you've got courtside seats at the Lakers games, and you're always constantly watching other people play basketball, right? Like, how is watching somebody play video games any different than watching professional sports on television or something? And it was a spot on point, right? And this is my fear is that, especially as entertainers or comedic entertainers, boy, you don't want to get to that point where you become out of touch with, I don't even just mean young people, where you just become out of touch with right now. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm afraid of with so many ways with Bill Maher. Well-read, educated, smart guy, but in so many ways out of touch.
Yeah, for the record, I watch video games on Twitch.
Sure, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, and to be quite honest, when I play video games online, yes, I play Overwatch. If anyone wants to play, it's PS4. DM me and we'll get together. But in all honesty, the only way you get better is by watching better players. And it's awesome. My kids watch video games all the time, and they're awesome.
There's always something that we watch, right? There was somebody out there who listened to radio and they gave their kids a hard time for watching too much television, right? The last thing I think anybody in our business wants to be is the person out of touch with what's going on today. With the whole you kids with your Twitch. That's the last thing I ever want to be, is someone going, I don't understand your fancy computer technology.
For me, it's when people like Mar, and I've seen him do this, they kind of scoff at people who spend their time on Facebook. How can you have such an empty life that you can spend half an hour talking to strangers on Facebook? They don't realize that Bill Maher's life, like you said, Ward, not only front row seats at Laker games, apparently, but he gets invited to social events every single night of the week, chooses which ones he wants to go to. He only has to open his door to see 2 or 3 fairly attractive young women who want to spend time with him. He's got friends from all walks of life who are partly friends with him because he gives them a platform on television. He doesn't realize that his life is not indicative of our lives. And he thinks that we should be living like him. Who has time for this? And then I'm off to play Vegas, and then I'm off to do this, and I'm off to do that. It's like, hey, I sit in my house. I'm glad if I have a trip to Walmart during the day. So excuse me for wanting to talk to people online. I don't have people face to face 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and he's done that with other things. I focused on the cancel culture thing, or the him talking about kids and all that. But there's been a lot of that. Like one day, him ranting about flavored water. I remember, and he was like, "You don't need flavored water. Just drink the water." He goes, "Want some flavored water? Pour some scotch, put some ice on it, wait for the ice to melt. That's your flavored water." And I was like, well, I mean, how is that any different than people having flavored water?
He would argue that the flavoring is bad for you, and it leads to diabetes and it leads to obesity. But if God forbid someone should say, well, I'm not so sure that your pot use, and excuse me, I should say weed. My kids have corrected me on this. I'm not so sure that your daily weed use is really good for you. Mar he'd go batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's hilarious about that is he is still convinced that smoking weed makes him rebellious and cool.
Yeah.
Every single week he's got to mention that he smokes weed like it's his cool credit.
Yeah, like he's Tommy Chong.
Cool badge. Yeah, exactly. And at this point you're kind of like, all right, you know what? Now you're just becoming the old dude who lives next door that tries to smoke.
You're Willie Nelson without the ponytail. Basically.
Your neighbor.
It's like, but it's like at first that was kind of funny, and then now it's like, okay, we get it, dude. You smoke weed. Guess what? It's not really nearly as cool as it used to be. It's just a thing we do.
Robyn, what were you going to say?
I was just saying, your neighbor, Willie Nelson.
Oh, my neighbor in Texas? Yeah, I see him all the time at the HEB.
Well, no,
hey, listen, everybody. Thank you for listening to this rambling diatribe of psychosis that we call a podcast. If you enjoy what we do here, please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. And if you'd like to join us in our political debate group between shows, it's called Open Fire Politics and Entertainment. It's not just about politics. It's also about, you guessed it, entertainment. So come there and chat with us and people like us. And please remember to post our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us as well. Robyn, why don't you remind us once again the name of the 2 projects that you're so passionately involved with right now?
Art Laws Podcast, which is we interview cultural outlaws, and Infodemic, which is premiering on PBS July 11th. So tune in.
And I've seen it, and it's really, really good. And Ward, what about you?
From the makers of Sharknado comes Triassic Hunt, the dramatic dinosaur action film, co-written and produced by yours truly, now available free with subscription on Amazon Prime.
What's the title again?
Triassic Hunt.
Triassic Hunt. Ward wrote this film, and it's available on video at Amazon Prime?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
So with that, Greg Matusak, other than lighting up a doobie, what will be the highlight of your week to come?
It's funny that you mentioned highlights because besides the magazine, which is awesome, I have a appointment with both Marvel and DC. I'm pitching on my new superhero.
Oh, really?
It's called Podcast Man.
Yeah.
I sit in a room, ramble on and on. Usually I start about some important event of world-shattering news, and then I end up talking about how I saw, celebrities catch STDs. And they're like, no, tell us about how to stop the bomb. And I go, wait, don't you want to hear about how Anne Hathaway cured her crabs? And they go, no.